Millionaire panics upon hearing the cook's last name. It was simply the same as his late wife's. William Thompson adjusted his tie as he observed the simple facade of the small restaurant in the south side of Chicago. At 56, the owner of one of the largest restaurant chains in the country, he still maintained the habit of visiting unknown establishments in search of new talent. On that September evening, something particularly drew him to that discreet place. The interior of the restaurant was cozy, with earthy toned walls and a few paintings that immediately caught his attention. He sat at a table near the window, where he could observe the kitchen activity through a strategic opening. "Good evening, sir. I'm Paul. I'll be serving you today." The waiter introduced himself, handing over the menu carefully. "Our recommendation is the pumpkin ravioli with sage sauce, the house specialty." William smiled, remembering that this was his wife Eleanor's favorite dish. 15 years had passed since her departure, but certain coincidences still had the power to touch his heart. "I'll take the recommendation," he replied, handing back the menu. As he waited, his eyes were drawn to one of the paintings on the wall. It was a delicate watercolor, depicting a kitchen scene from a peculiar angle, exactly the same angle Eleanor used to use in her works. The style, the colors, even the discreet signature in the lower right corner. Everything reminded him of his late wife's work. His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of the dish. The aroma that emanated was surprisingly familiar. The presentation was impeccable, with small details that showed special care in its execution. "The chef would like to know if everything is to your liking," the waiter said, returning a few minutes later. "Please convey my compliments. The dish is exceptional," William replied, genuinely impressed. "Could I meet the person responsible for this creation?" A few moments later, a young chef approached his table. William felt as if time had stopped. There before him was a younger version of Eleanor. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same shy smile, even the way she slightly tilted her head when greeting someone. "Good evening, sir. I'm Emily Harrison, the restaurant's chef. I'm glad you enjoyed the dish." William took a few seconds to compose himself. The last name was the same as Eleanor's before she married. "The ravioli, is the recipe yours?" "Actually, it's a family recipe. My adoptive mother taught it to me when I was little," explained Emily, her eyes lighting up as she spoke about food, just like Eleanor's used to. "Adoptive?" The word slipped out before William could stop himself. "Yes," Emily smiled, unbothered. "I was adopted as a baby. I'm very lucky with my parents." William quickly did the math. Emily must have been around 25 years old. Eleanor was 43 when she passed 15 years ago. If Emily was adopted as a baby, the dates aligned perfectly with the time Eleanor lived in Colorado before they moved to Chicago. "The paintings, are they yours?" he asked, pointing to the watercolor he had admired. "No, actually, they're by a local artist. I bought them at an art fair a few years ago. Something about them deeply moved me," Emily replied, gazing at the painting fondly. "Do you enjoy art?" "My wife was a painter," William answered, his voice soft. "These works remind me a lot of her style." Emily smiled again, and William felt his heart tighten. It wasn't just the physical resemblance, it was as if Eleanor's essence was there, manifested in this young chef who blended art and cuisine in such a familiar way. "I need to get back to the kitchen now," Emily apologized. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your dinner." William watched her walk away, his mind buzzing with possibilities. He remembered the long afternoons when Eleanor would lock herself in her studio, especially on September 25th. How had he never noticed the pattern before? The paintings from those days always had a common theme: a young female figure, seen from behind or partially hidden, always in motion as if she were leaving. He finished his dinner in silence, absorbing every detail of the surroundings. When he asked for the bill, he requested a restaurant card. He needed to come back. He needed to understand. But most of all, he needed to be sure he wasn't making connections driven solely by longing. As he left the restaurant, he glanced once more at the watercolor on the wall. The signature, which she hadn't noticed carefully before, now jumped out at her. H. Oliveira. Her heart raced. This wasn't just a simple coincidence. It was the beginning of a story that Eleanor had kept secret throughout all the years of her marriage. The next morning, William climbed up to the attic of his house, a space he had avoided for years. There, all of Eleanor's works were stored, carefully preserved in chronological order. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the boxes dated before their marriage. The first paintings were typical of an artist in training, still lifes, urban landscapes, studies of light and shadow. But when he reached the works from 1998, something changed. The brushstrokes became more emotional, more intense. A particular series caught his attention. 5 small paintings, all created in September of that year. The first showed a sleeping baby, depicted with soft brushstrokes in pastel tones. The second, an abstract maternity scene, with 2 figures merging in an embrace. The third depicted an empty crib, illuminated by a soft light coming from a window. The fourth, a pair of baby shoes on a table. And the last, a young woman from behind, holding a bundle in her arms, walking toward a misty horizon. William sat on the dusty attic floor, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together in his mind. 1998. Eleanor was 18 at the time. She lived in Denver with her parents, and according to her, she had taken an art course that year. But now, looking at these paintings, a different story began to emerge. He continued his search, now focusing specifically on the works created on September 25th of each year. It was astonishing how I had never noticed the pattern before. Each painting told a piece of a silent story. A girl playing on a swing, seen from afar, a teenager holding a book in a library, a young woman cooking captured through a window. Among the canvases, he found a yellowed envelope. Inside, a series of newspaper clippings from Denver, all related to local art exhibitions. In one of them, a small note caught his attention. Young artist E. Harrison donates work to charity auction for the benefit of St. Clara Orphanage. St. Clara Orphanage. William grabbed his phone and did a quick search. The institution still existed, now operating as an adoption support center. His hands were sweating as he dialed the number. "Good morning. I'd like to speak with someone who worked at the institution in 1998, he requested, his voice trying to remain calm. "One moment, I'll transfer you to Sister Grace. She's been at the institution for over 30 years, replied the receptionist. After a few minutes of waiting, a serene voice answered. William explained that he was researching art donations made to the orphanage in the late 90s. The nun listened attentively. "Oh yes, I remember that young artist well," Sister Grace replied enthusiastically. "Eleanor was her name. She used to visit a specific baby often. She ended up donating several works to our chapel. Some are still here." William felt his heart race. "And that baby, do you remember where she went?" "Oh, that was a special case," replied the nun. "The birth mother herself chose the family. A very good couple from Denver. You must understand that I can't provide more details." "Of course, I completely understand," William quickly said. "Do you happen to remember the birth date of that child?" "That I can tell you, September 25th, 1998. I never forgot because the birth mother would come every year on that date, leaving flowers in the chapel. She stopped coming when she moved to Chicago, but she continued sending donations for many years." William thanked her and hung up the phone, his hands trembling. He turned his attention to the paintings scattered across the attic. Each one was a window into Eleanor's heart, a way to stay connected to the daughter she had given up for adoption. He picked up Emily's restaurant card again. The universe had conspired for him to uncover this secret now, 15 years after Eleanor's passing. But how to approach this truth? How to tell Emily that her birth mother had never completely abandoned her, that she had followed her through her art, painting moments of her life as if they were stolen photographs from fate. Among the canvases he found a small journal. He hesitated for a moment before opening it. The first pages were blank, but in the middle of the notebook he found a letter addressed to him, dated a week before Eleanor's passing. William held his breath, preparing to read the words his wife had saved for him. Words that he felt would completely change his understanding of the love of his life and the young chef he had met the night before. William sat in his favorite armchair, the one where Eleanor used to read for hours, and opened the journal with reverent care. His wife's delicate handwriting filled his eyes, instantly transporting him to the past. "My dear William, if you are reading this letter, it means you have finally found the pieces of the puzzle I kept hidden in my heart for so many years. I know I should have shared this secret with you sooner, but some truths are like unfinished paintings. We need the right time to add the final brushstrokes. Before I met you, when I was just 18, I lived a youthful love story in Denver. From that story came the greatest gift life could give me, A little girl, my dear Emily, but I was too young, too scared, and unable to raise a child on my own. My parents, worried about the social scandal, pressured me for a quick and discreet solution. But I couldn't simply hand my daughter over to fate. I spent months searching for the perfect family until I found Margaret and John Harrison. They couldn't have children, and their love overflowed in every word, every gesture. I knew immediately they would be the ideal parents for Emily. The adoption was done directly, with all the legal documentation, but with a silent agreement. They would keep the Harrison surname, and I could, from afar, follow Emily's growth. I never interfered, never approached, but through my art, I recorded every precious moment I could witness. When we met, William, you brought light back into my life. Our love was true and deep, but there was this secret eating away at me. Every time you praised my paintings, especially the ones I made on Emily's birthday, my heart ached to tell you the truth. The paintings you always admired weren't just art. They were pages of the visual diary I created for my daughter. The swing in the park, the girl in the library, the young woman cooking. Each canvas tells a moment of her life that I observed from a distance, always on September 25th, her birthday. Margaret and John were wonderful in raising her. I watched Emily grow strong, determined, passionate about cooking. She inherited not only my features, but also my passion for the art of creation, even if she chose pots over paintbrushes. Now, my love, if you found this letter, you've probably already met Emily. I ask that you protect this secret with the same care that I have protected it. She has a family who loved and raised her with devotion. My role in her life was merely that of a distant observer, an anonymous artist who recorded her journey in brushstrokes of watercolor. But if fate allows you to grow closer, I want her to know that there was not a single day when I did not think of her, did not give thanks for her existence, did not celebrate her achievements, even from afar. Every painting I created was a way of saying, I love you, without words. William, you were the best companion anyone could wish for. Forgive me for not sharing this secret sooner. Some truths need to mature like paints on a canvas. They need the right time to be revealed. With all my love, Eleanor. William closed the diary, his hands trembling slightly. The tears streaming down his face were not just of sadness. They were of admiration for Eleanor's strength and sensitivity, for the love she had quietly nurtured all those years. He stood up and walked to the window, gazing at the garden Eleanor had loved so much. The afternoon sun cast shadows on the rose bushes, creating a play of light and shadow that his wife would have loved to capture. Now he understood why she spent hours contemplating that garden, perhaps imagining Emily growing up, playing there. The discovery did nothing to diminish the love he felt for Eleanor. On the contrary, it deepened his admiration for her. What extraordinary strength it must have taken to keep that love hidden, protected, expressing it only through her art. He returned to the attic and began organizing the paintings chronologically, each one now taking on a new meaning. They were not just works of art. They were chapters of the most silent love story he had ever known, a story that, now, was in his hands to continue. A week after his discovery, William returned to Emily's restaurant. This time he arrived earlier, when the place was still quiet. He sat at the same table, looking again at the watercolor on the wall with new eyes. Now he knew that it was not just a piece bought at an art fair. It was a silent message from Eleanor to her daughter. Mr. Thompson, what a pleasant surprise, Emily approached, a genuine smile lighting up her face. The ravioli again? Actually, William replied, controlling the emotion in his voice, I came to make a professional proposal. Emily sat down across from him, curious. William continued, I own the Flavors of America restaurant chain. We're developing a new project that combines gastronomy and art. I'd like to invite you to partner with us. Emily's eyes sparkled with interest. Art and gastronomy? That intrigues me. What would this partnership look like? We want to create spaces where the culinary experience blends with artistic expressions, cooking workshops combined with art therapy sessions, exhibitions that dialogue with the dishes served, William explained, watching Emily's every reaction. Your cooking has an artistic sensibility that would fit perfectly into this proposal. It's curious, Emily smiled, absent-mindedly playing with her apron. I've always felt a special connection with art. When I was a child, my mother, my adoptive mother, enrolled me in painting classes. I didn't pursue art professionally, but it has always been present in the way I cook. William felt his heart race. It was like hearing Eleanor talk about the connection between her two passions. Why didn't you continue with painting? I can't explain it. It felt like I was trying to reach something unattainable, a perfection that only existed in my imagination, Emily replied thoughtfully. In the kitchen, I found my own way of expressing myself. Perhaps we can reclaim that connection to art through the project, William suggested gently. How about visiting our headquarters tomorrow? I can better explain our proposal. Emily hesitated for a moment. I need to talk to my parents first. They've invested so much in this restaurant. Of course, I completely understand, William quickly added. The idea isn't for you to abandon your restaurant, but rather to expand your possibilities. You know, Emily leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. There's something familiar about you, Mr. Thompson. I can't explain it. It's like we've met somewhere before. William felt a lump in his throat. Perhaps it's because we share the same passion for the art of creation, he replied carefully. At that moment, Paul, the waiter, approached urgently. Emily, sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem in the kitchen. I need to go. She stood up quickly. Can I have your card? I promised to get in touch as soon as I talk to my parents. After Emily walked away, William remained at the table, observing the restaurant's activity. Through the kitchen doorway, he could see her leading her team with the same gentle firmness that Eleanor displayed in her studio. As he savored his dinner, he mentally mapped out the next steps. He needed to be careful, to build a relationship of trust before any revelation. The art and gastronomy project would be the perfect path for this approach. On his way back home, William stopped at an art gallery. There he bought painting supplies, canvases, brushes, paints. He didn't know exactly how or when, but something told him these materials would be important in his journey to reconnect with Emily. In his office, he spent the night organizing a detailed project that combined gastronomy and art therapy. Every element was carefully thought out to create an environment where Emily could naturally explore her artistic heritage, even without knowing her true origin. Before sleeping, William opened Helena's diary again to the page with the letter. I'll do this right, my love, he whispered to the page as if speaking to Eleanor. I'll take care of our Emily with all the love you've held onto all these years. Emily parked her car in front of the imposing building of the Flavors of America network. Her hands gripped the steering wheel as she mentally rehearsed the conversation she had with her parents the night before. Sweetheart, this is a unique opportunity, her mother, Margaret, had said with shining eyes. You've always wanted to expand your horizons. But Mom, what about our restaurant? Emily, John, her father, interjected with his usual wisdom. That restaurant is your dream come true. Nothing will change that. But maybe it's time for you to aim higher. Now standing in front of the building, Emily felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. As she entered the lobby, she was greeted by William, who awaited her with a warm smile. Welcome, Emily. Shall we begin our tour? The first floor housed a restaurant school, where young talents learned the techniques of high gastronomy. On the second floor, a modern art gallery occupied the entire space. But it was on the third floor that Emily felt something inexplicable. This is our art therapy space, explained William, opening the doors to a spacious, well-lit studio. Here, people find healing through art and gastronomy. Emily walked through the studio, her fingers gliding over empty easels. Natural light streamed through the large windows, creating patterns on the floor that reminded her of the paintings in her restaurant. Her hands tingled as if they wanted to grab a brush. Do you paint, Mr. Thompson? She asked, noticing the blank canvases neatly arranged in a corner. No, William replied softly. My wife was the artist. Helena was her name. Emily approached a wall where several works were displayed, her eyes fixed on one particular canvas. A kitchen seen through a window, painted in soft shades of blue and gold. This painting, Emily whispered. It looks so much like the one in your restaurant, William finished. They're by the same artist, Eleanor Harrison. Emily turned abruptly. Harrison? How? An interesting coincidence, William replied, keeping his voice steady. Eleanor created several works related to gastronomy. This space will be dedicated to exploring the connection between art and cuisine. Emily continued to observe the painting, feeling an inexplicable connection to those brushstrokes. You know, since I was little, I've felt something special when I look at certain works of art. as if they were speaking to me in some way. William watched as she approached other paintings. In one of them, a girl was playing in a park, her face partially hidden by a straw hat. Emily stopped in front of this canvas, her eyes fixed on the details. "This hat," she murmured. "I had one just like it when I was a child. My mother kept it in a memory box." William's heart raced. That painting was one of the works Eleanor had created for one of Emily's birthdays. "Art has these coincidences," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mr. Thompson," Emily turned to him, her eyes shining with determination. "I accept your proposal. Something tells me I need to be part of this project." William smiled, feeling his eyes moisten. "Great. We can start whenever you're ready." "There's one condition," Emily added. "I want to learn more about Eleanor Harrison. Her works, they touch me in a way I can't explain." William felt his heart leap. "Of course," he replied. "I have her entire collection. We can explore it together." At that moment, a ray of sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the canvas of the girl in the park. Emily stepped closer again, her fingers almost touching the painting. "Funny," she said, more to herself than to William. "This scene, it's like a memory I can't quite grasp. Like a dream that slips away when you wake up." William watched his daughter standing before the painting his wife had created years ago, capturing a precious moment without Emily even knowing. The universe was weaving its invisible threads, bringing mother and daughter closer through art, even though one of them was no longer physically present. "When can we start?" Emily asked, still absorbed in the painting. "How about tomorrow? We can start by organizing a special exhibition with Eleanor's works, something that pairs well with your dishes." Emily smiled, and in that smile William saw Eleanor. "Perfect. I feel like this is the beginning of something very special." "Yes," William replied, his voice soft. "Very special indeed." The next morning, Emily arrived early at the studio. She found William organizing several canvases, each one telling a silent story she didn't fully understand yet. "I brought something for you to see," he said, handing her a scrapbook. "These are articles about Eleanor's exhibitions." Emily sat on a stool, carefully flipping through the scrapbook. Her eyes scanned the yellowed pages, absorbing every detail. She stopped at a particular photo, Eleanor at her last exhibition 15 years ago. "She was beautiful," Emily commented, her fingers tracing the outline of the face in the photograph. "And there's something familiar about her." William watched the scene, his heart tightening. The resemblance between mother and daughter was even more evident when Emily tilted her head that way, just as Eleanor used to do when studying a new canvas. "Here," he said, picking up a covered canvas. "This is one of her most special works." As he removed the cloth, he revealed a painting that made Emily gasp. It was an old restaurant in Denver with its checkered tablecloths and wide windows. At the center of the composition, a young waitress was serving coffee. "This place," Emily whispered, "it's the Colonial Cafe. My parents used to take me there every Sunday when I was a child." "How did Eleanor know that cafe?" "She lived in Denver for a while," William replied carefully. "She liked to paint everyday scenes." Marina stepped closer to the canvas, her eyes fixed on a detail in the corner, a little girl eating pudding, her face partially visible. "This was painted in September 2003, William commented, observing Marina's reaction. "Eleanor had an interesting habit. She always created special works on September 25th. Marina froze. "September 25th? Her voice trembled slightly. "That's my birthday." A meaningful silence filled the studio. Marina continued studying the painting, her thoughts clearly unsettled. "Mr. Thompson," she began hesitantly, "how long has Eleanor been gone?" 15 years, he replied softly. "But she left an extraordinary legacy in her works." Marina nodded, turning her attention to other canvases. She stopped in front of a series of paintings depicting different stages of a girl's life, always seen from a distance, always in motion. "It's like she's telling a story," Marina murmured. "But I can't quite understand what it is." "Sometimes," William replied, choosing his words carefully, "the most important stories are the ones we uncover little by little." At that moment, Paul, the waiter from Marina's restaurant, hurried into the studio. "Marina, sorry to interrupt, but your parents are at the restaurant. They seem worried." Marina frowned. "Worried? They never show up unannounced." "Go," William encouraged. "We can continue this later." After Emily left, William sat down heavily in a chair. The connection was happening naturally, but he sensed that Margaret and John, Emily's adoptive parents, might have noticed something. He needed to find a way to include them in this process of revelation. He picked up his phone and dialed the number of Emily's restaurant. After a few rings, a woman's voice answered. "Mrs. Margaret Harrison," he asked. "This is William Thompson. I think we need to talk about Emily and about Eleanor." On the other end of the line, a deep silence followed, then a sigh of understanding. "Finally," Margaret replied, her voice choked. "We've been waiting for this call for 15 years. The cafe chosen for the meeting was on a quiet street, far from Emily's restaurant. William arrived first, choosing a discreet table at the back of the establishment. Minutes later, Margaret and John Harrison entered, their faces a mix of apprehension and relief. "Thank you for meeting us, Mr. Thompson," Margaret said as she sat down. Her hands tightly held an old folder. "I think we've been waiting for this moment for a very long time." John held his wife's hand, offering silent support. "Helena came to us personally," he began to explain. "She was a frightened young woman, but determined to secure the best for her daughter. She chose us after visiting several families," Margaret continued, carefully opening the folder. "She said she felt something special when she met us, and she made us promise two things: to keep the Harrison last name and to accept a special gift every year." From the folder, she pulled out a series of envelopes, each dated with a different September 25th. Every year, without fail, we received a painting from Helena. She sent them through an art gallery, always with a note saying they were works from an artist who admired our work with family restaurants. William picked up the envelopes with trembling hands. Each contained a small watercolor, depicting moments from Emily's life: her first day at school, a ballet recital, her graduation from culinary school. "We never told Emily about the paintings," John explained, "but we kept them all. Something told us that one day they would be important. The most extraordinary thing," Margaret added, "is that Helena painted these moments without being present. It was as if she had a special connection with Emily, as if she could feel the important moments of her life." "In truth," William replied softly, "Helena was present. She watched Emily from a distance, capturing these moments in her art. It was her way of staying connected to her daughter without interfering in her life." Margaret wiped away a tear. "We always knew. At art fairs, at food festivals, sometimes we would see her watching Emily from afar. We never interfered because we respected her wish to keep her distance. When we found out she had passed," John continued, his voice choked, "we waited for someone to reach out to us. The paintings stopped coming, but we kept each one waiting for the right moment. Emily started showing an interest in art very early." Margaret smiled, reminiscing. "It was as if Eleanor's artistic talent ran through her veins, but she found her own form of expression through gastronomy." William observed the watercolors spread across the table. Each one was a testament to Eleanor's silent love, to the Harrisons' care in preserving this story. "And now," John asked, his voice heavy with concern, "how will we tell Emily?" "She's already feeling the connection," William explained, "through the paintings in the art and gastronomy project. It's as if something inside her recognizes Eleanor's art. Yesterday," Margaret hesitated, "when she told us about the paintings in her studio, about how she felt strangely connected to them, we knew it was time. But we need to do this very carefully." "I have an idea," William said, picking up one of the watercolors. "Eleanor left a letter for Emily. Along with her paintings and the memories you've kept, we can help her discover her story in a gentle way." The three continued talking, carefully planning how they would reveal the truth to Emily. Each of them held a precious part of this story. William with the letter and the studio paintings, the Harrisons with the annual watercolors and childhood memories, and Emily, unknowingly, carrying within herself the artistic essence of Eleanor. "She needs to know how much she was loved," Margaret concluded, putting away the watercolors with the same care she had preserved them all those years. "For all of us." William nodded, feeling a deep gratitude for that couple who had raised his stepdaughter with so much love and respect for Eleanor's memory. Now together they could complete the painting that Eleanor had started so many years ago. Emily spent the morning reorganizing the restaurant, but her mind kept drifting back to the paintings in William's studio. There was something in those works that stirred her in an inexplicable way, like a familiar melody heard from afar. Her parents had shown up unexpectedly the day before, seeming worried, but they left with a vague excuse about restaurant paperwork. Emily knew her parents too well not to notice that something was off. "Emily," Paul's voice brought her back to the present. "There's a lady asking about the painting on the wall." Approaching the customer, Emily found an elegant woman carefully studying the watercolor that always caught everyone's attention. "This piece is special," the woman remarked, not taking her eyes off the painting. "I recognize Eleanor Harrison's touch anywhere. I was the curator of her last exhibition." Emily's heart raced. "You knew Eleanor Harrison?" "Sophia Mendelssohn," the woman introduced herself, extending her hand. "And yes, I knew Eleanor very well. We worked together for years. This piece," she pointed to the watercolor, "was part of a special series she produced every year in September." Emily felt her legs weaken slightly. "In September?" "Yes, always on the 25th, Sophia smiled, watching Emily's reaction closely. Eleanor had a special connection with this date. She said it was when her inspiration was strongest. Emily pulled up a chair and sat down at Sophia's table. "Please, tell me more about her." "Eleanor was a unique artist," Sophia began, her eyes shining with memories. "She had a special gift for capturing everyday moments and turning them into something magical. But there was one particular series, which she called Portraits of the Heart, that always intrigued me." "Why?" "They were paintings that seemed to tell a continuous story. A young woman in different stages of life, always seen from a distance, always in motion. Eleanor never fully explained the meaning behind this series, but there was so much love in every brushstroke." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. "What happened to those works?" "Most of them are with William Thompson, her husband," Sophia replied, watching Emily's reaction closely. "By the way, I heard you're working with him now." "Yes, on a project that combines gastronomy and art," Emily confirmed, her mind buzzing with connections she couldn't fully grasp. "You know," Sophia continued, reaching for her bag, "I have something here that you might want to see." She pulled out an old exhibition catalogue. "This was Eleanor's last show. Look at the date." Emily took the catalogue with trembling hands. The exhibition had opened on September 25th, exactly 15 years ago. Flipping through the pages, her eyes stopped on a photograph that made her heart leap. It was the painting of the Colonial Cafe, the same one she had seen in William's studio. "That girl in the corner," Emily whispered, pointing to the figure eating pudding. Sophia smiled gently. Eleanor had a special talent for capturing the essence of people in her work. Sometimes, it seemed like she painted memories rather than scenes. At that moment, Emily's phone buzzed with a message from William. "I need to show you something important tomorrow at the studio. Your parents will also be there." Emily looked again at the catalogue in her hands, at the date that coincided with her birthday, at the paintings that seemed to tell a story she was beginning to suspect she knew intimately. "Mrs. Sophia," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly, "you said Eleanor painted memories. Did she paint real people?" Sophia stood up, placing a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. "Dear, sometimes the answers we seek are in the questions we haven't yet asked. Tomorrow, when you meet William and your parents, trust your heart. It already knows the truth." Emily watched Sophia leave, the catalogue still in her hands, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Something was about to be revealed, something she might have always known deep within her soul, where art and love blended in invisible brushstrokes. The studio looked different that morning. William had arranged all of Eleanor's paintings in chronological order, creating a visual timeline that began with her earliest works from 1998 and ended with her final creations. In the center of the space, a round table with 5 chairs awaited the most important moment of that story. Emily arrived first, carrying the catalogue Sophia had given her. Her eyes scanned the walls, now seeing the paintings with a new perspective, a new understanding beginning to form in her heart. "You came early," William remarked softly, watching her study the works. "I couldn't sleep," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I spent the whole night looking through this catalogue, thinking about all the coincidences. Were they really just coincidences?" Before William could respond, Margaret and John entered the studio. Margaret was carrying the old folder with the watercolors, and John held a carved wooden box that Emily recognized immediately. "My memory box," Emily exclaimed. "Why did you bring it?" "Because today is the day to put all the pieces together," Margaret answered, her voice both gentle and firm. "Sit down, dear. We have a story to share with you." Emily looked at her parents, at William, at the paintings on the walls. Her heart was beating so hard it felt like it might leap out of her chest. She sat at the table, her restless hands playing with the edge of the catalogue. "It began with a young artist," William started, his voice soft, "who had a special gift for capturing the essence of life on her canvases. Her name was Eleanor Harrison." "My last name," Emily whispered. "Yes," Margaret continued, carefully opening the folder. "Eleanor came to us in 1998. She was pregnant, young, scared, but determined to secure the best future for her baby." John opened the memory box, pulling out a small straw hat. "This hat," he smiled. "It wasn't bought from just any store. It was a gift left with you, handmade by your birth mother." Emily picked up the hat with trembling hands, recognizing it from the painting she had seen in the studio. Her eyes filled with tears as Margaret began to lay out the watercolors on the table. "Every year on your birthday," Margaret explained, "we would receive a painting. Eleanor watched us from afar, capturing precious moments of your life through her art. So, all those paintings," Emily looked at the walls, her voice choked, "were about me." William picked up the letter Eleanor had left for him. "Your mother never stopped loving you, Emily. She found a unique way to stay connected through the art you both shared." "But why did she never—" Emily began, but stopped when William handed her another letter, this one addressed to her. She left explanations, words she held onto for years, waiting for the right moment, he said softly. "Eleanor married me years later, but she never forgot you. Every painting she created was a way of saying, 'I love you,' without words." Emily opened the letter carefully, recognizing the same delicate signature she had seen on the paintings in her restaurant. As she read, silent tears streamed down her face. "My dear Emily," she read aloud, "if you are reading this letter, it means you have finally found your way back to art, to your story, to the truth that has always been painted in every moment of your life." Margaret and John held each other's hands, watching their daughter uncover the other part of her story. There was no jealousy or fear in their hearts, only gratitude for how fate had intertwined all those lives. "Yup." Marina looked at her adoptive parents. "Did you always know? We knew that Eleanor loved you enough to ensure you had a family who could dedicate all the time and love you deserved," John replied, "and she chose us for this sacred mission." Marina stood up, walking to the wall where the first painting in the series hung, the baby sleeping in the crib. Her fingers lightly touched the canvas, feeling the texture of the brushstrokes her biological mother had left so long ago. "That's why I always felt something special when I painted," she whispered. "That's why art always felt like a natural language to me, even when I chose gastronomy as my profession." William approached, gently placing an arm around her shoulders. "Eleanor would be proud to see how you found your own form of art, your own way of touching people's hearts." Marina turned, hugging her adoptive parents tightly, then William. In that moment, no words were needed, just the love that had guided every decision, every brushstroke, every moment of that extraordinary story. In the days following the revelation, Marina immersed herself deeply in Eleanor's artistic universe. Each painting took on new meaning, every brushstroke told a story she now fully understood. The art and gastronomy project gained an even more special dimension. Marina began creating dishes inspired by Eleanor's works, translating colors and textures into flavors that touched the souls of her customers. "It's amazing how her art influences my cooking now," Marina commented to William as they prepared for the opening of the new space. "It's as if every dish is a continuation of the stories she began to tell." The studio had been transformed into a unique environment where Eleanor's paintings conversed with Marina's culinary art. The walls told the story of love between mother and daughter through the canvases, while the tables offered gastronomic experiences that complemented each piece. "I found this yesterday," William said, handing Marina an old recipe notebook. "It was Eleanor's. She collected recipes the same way she collected moments in her paintings." Marina opened the notebook with reverence, recognizing some of the recipes her adoptive mother had taught her. "So that's how you got the pumpkin ravioli. Did Eleanor leave the recipe with you?" Margaret, who helped organize the space, smiled. "She wanted you to have a piece of her, even if you didn't know it. The recipe came with you. It was her favorite dish during her pregnancy." The restaurant's new concept would be launched on a special date, September 25th, Emily's birthday. The walls of the space would tell the complete story through Eleanor's paintings, starting with her earliest works from 1998, up to the last pieces she had created. "Look at this," Emily called William, showing a page from the recipe notebook. In the corner, there was a small sketch of a dish that combined visual elements with culinary instructions. She saw food as art, too. "Eleanor always said that every form of creation is an expression of love," William replied, watching Emily recreate the dish sketched in the notebook. "She would be proud to see how you're carrying this forward." On the eve of the opening, Emily gathered the entire team for a special moment. In the center of the hall, a new painting had been placed, the first piece Emily had created since discovering her story. The canvas showed the interior of a kitchen viewed through a window, but unlike Eleanor's works, which observed from the outside, this one showed the perspective from within. At the center of the composition, a young chef worked on her creation, while the silhouette of a woman with paintbrushes could be seen reflected in the window glass. "It's my way of saying we're together now," Emily explained to her family. "She watched me through her paintings, and now I keep her alive through my art." Margaret and John hugged their daughter, proud of how she had embraced this new dimension of her story with such grace and love. William watched the scene, his heart overflowing with gratitude for being part of this extraordinary journey. "You know," Emily said, adjusting one of the dishes for the opening, "now I understand why I always felt so complete with you, my parents, but still felt like there was something more. It wasn't emptiness. It was a calling. Art calling me back to my full story. The new space would be more than a restaurant or an art gallery. It would be a place where stories met, where art and gastronomy merged to create unique experiences, where the love of 2 generations of artists would continue to touch people's lives." "Eleanor always said that true art is born from love," William commented, watching Emily put the final touches on her exhibition. "And look at what you two have created with so much love. She with her brushes, you with your pots, and both of you with your hearts." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. Now she understood that her art, whether in the kitchen or on canvas, was a celebration of all the kinds of love that had shaped her life, the love of her adoptive parents who raised her, the love of Eleanor that had guided her through art, and the love for creation that ran through her veins, a precious legacy from her biological mother. The night of the opening arrived, transforming the space into a sanctuary of memories and renewal. The venue had been decorated with special care. Eleanor's paintings formed a chronological narrative on the walls, interspersed with photographs of Emily's life, creating a visual dialogue between past and present. Sophia Mendelssohn, the former curator of Eleanor's exhibitions, arrived early to help with the final preparations. Her eyes sparkled as she saw how the works had been arranged. "Eleanor always knew how to create powerful visual narratives," she remarked, adjusting the lighting on one of the canvases. "But this exhibition, it's as if the paintings are finally telling their true story." Emily moved between the kitchen and the main hall, overseeing every detail. Each dish on the tasting menu had been created in harmony with a specific painting by Eleanor. The pumpkin ravioli, now understood as a culinary heritage, held a place of honor. "This sauce," Emily explained to the waitstaff during the final instructions, "has the same color palette Mom used in her sunset paintings. When you serve it, tell the guests that every element of the dish is inspired by a specific artwork." William watched his stepdaughter with pride. In just a few weeks, she had not only absorbed her history, but found a unique way to honor it. The project that had started as a way to connect had transformed into something much greater. The guests began to arrive. Art critics, renowned chefs, old friends of Eleanor, all drawn by the innovative proposal of uniting gastronomy and art into a complete experience. Among them were familiar faces from the past, people who had been part of Eleanor's artistic journey. "Emily," Margaret called, handing her a small package, "we found this morning while organizing the last boxes in the attic." Inside the package was a paint-stained apron, carefully folded. A small piece of paper fell out when Emily unfolded it. It was a sketch of a woman cooking, dated September 1998, with a note in the margin, "For my daughter, when she finds her own art." "She knew," Emily whispered, stroking the stained fabric. "Somehow, she knew I would find my way here." The most emotional moment of the evening came when Emily gathered all the guests for a special presentation. In the center of the room, a covered easel awaited the right moment. "Tonight," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion, We celebrate more than the union of art and gastronomy. We celebrate the power of love that transcends time and distance. My mother, Eleanor Harrison, spent years documenting my life through her paintings, even when we couldn't be together. Today I present my response. As she unveiled the easel, a diptych was revealed, two canvases that complemented each other. The first, a work by Eleanor, showed a woman watching a girl from a distance. The second, painted by Emily, depicted the same scene from the girl's perspective, now grown up, looking back. A collective gasp filled the room. The similarity in styles was striking, but Emily had managed to imprint her own personality onto the work, blending culinary elements into the composition. Every dish we serve tonight, Emily continued, is a conversation with a specific painting. When you taste the pumpkin ravioli, you'll be savoring the recipe my mother created while she was expecting me. The sage sauce has the same hue as the watercolors she used to paint horizons. William stepped forward, placing an arm around Emily's shoulders. Margaret and John joined them, forming a complete family circle, united by love and art. Eleanor used to say that true art is born when we open our hearts to the world, Sophia remarked, raising her glass. Tonight, we see the result of many open hearts, of many different loves coming together in a single celebration. The evening unfolded like a well-orchestrated symphony, each element harmonizing perfectly, the paintings on the walls, the dishes coming out of the kitchen, the stories being shared. It was more than an inauguration. It was the culmination of a love story that had begun 25 years earlier, when a young artist decided that the greatest act of love would be to ensure the best for her daughter. 6 months after the opening, the space had become a landmark in the city. Reservations had to be made weeks in advance, and the waiting list for culinary art workshops kept growing. Emily developed a special program called Flavors on Canvas, where participants were invited to create dishes inspired by works of art while exploring their own stories through gastronomy. The project ended up becoming a form of therapy for many people, especially those dealing with family issues. On a quiet afternoon between workshops, Emily found William contemplating one of Eleanor's latest works, a canvas depicting a woman painting while a young girl cooked in the background. "It's incredible how she could see the future through her art," Emily commented, stopping beside him. "It's almost as if she were painting this moment." "Eleanor always said that true art transcends time," William replied, smiling. "She painted not just what she saw, but what her heart knew existed." The space had become more than a restaurant or a gallery. It was a place of encounters and discoveries. Adoptive families often sought out Emily to share their stories, inspired by the way she had intertwined her two heritages. Margaret and John remained actively involved in the project. John had begun documenting the stories of visitors, creating an archive of narratives about family, art, and love. Margaret coordinated a support group for adoptive parents, using art as a tool for expression. "You know," Emily said to William as they prepared a new exhibition, "I always wondered why I felt so complete in the kitchen. Now I understand it's because there I can be all parts of myself, Margaret and John's daughter, Eleanor's daughter, the artist, and the chef." The new exhibition would be dedicated to the works created by participants in the Flavors on Canvas program. Each piece told a story of discovery and connection, inspired by Emily and Eleanor's journey. "Look at this." Emily showed William a notebook where she recorded the recipes created during the workshops. Every dish has a story behind it, just like Mom's paintings. The notebook had transformed into a visual diary, blending recipes, sketches, and personal stories. It was a continuation of Eleanor's legacy, but with Emily's unique signature. On a special page, Emily had pasted a recent photograph, herself wearing Eleanor's paint-stained apron, preparing a dish while one of her own paintings dried in the background. Beside it, she wrote, "Some legacies are not visible to the eye but can be felt in the heart." The project ended up attracting the attention of researchers interested in the therapeutic benefits of culinary art. Emily began giving talks on how gastronomy could be a channel for artistic expression and emotional healing. "Eleanor would be proud," Sophia commented during a visit. "You not only preserved her legacy, but transformed it into something even greater." On a special evening, exactly 1 year after the opening, Emily gathered her family for an intimate dinner. In the restaurant's kitchen, now decorated with a mix of her own and Eleanor's paintings, she prepared the special pumpkin ravioli. "Every time I make this dish," she said as she served it, "I feel as if I'm connected to a moment in the past when Mom first created it." William raised his glass in a toast. "To Eleanor, who taught us that love always finds a way to express itself, whether through brushstrokes or flavors." "To all forms of love," Emily added, looking at her adoptive parents with affection. "And to all forms of art that help us tell our stories." Margaret and John smiled, their eyes shining with pride and emotion. The family Eleanor had so carefully chosen for her daughter had expanded, creating an even larger circle of love. At the end of that evening, Emily stayed alone in the restaurant for a moment. She looked at the walls covered in art, Eleanor's paintings, her own creations, and the works of the project's participants. Each piece told a story of love, loss, discovery, and renewal. She picked up her brushes and a blank canvas. In the quiet of the night, she began to paint. Not a copy of Eleanor's style, but her own interpretation of the story they shared. It was a new tradition she had created, painting while waiting for new dishes to cook. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered into the silence, her hands dancing across the canvas, "for showing me that the art of love has many ways to express itself." The painting that emerged that night would be the start of a new series, one that combined elements of cooking with family memories, finally uniting all parts of her story into one beautiful narrative.